Hey class, Prof. JC here, and I wanted to do something different as we wrap up our class time together. First of all, I want to say that you guys have done a great job in this class, and I appreciate it. I appreciate your assignments. Again, I'm not commenting hardly at all, but I'm in there reading them and seeing them, and so I appreciate the work that you've done. Here's what I want to do. I want to wrap up our last assignment, and I want to talk a little bit about this idea of privilege. I'm not going to talk much. I really want you to, I want you to look at it. And the reason why I bring this up, I've taught this class a few times now here at Point Loma, and here's what I found is that for some reason at Point Loma, this class can be a little bit of a lightning rod. Now, maybe it wasn't for you, great, okay? But for some people, it can be. And the biggest lightning rod word, I guess, would be when, especially with the in-person classes where we can really have a chance to go at it and really talk about this. And this kind of class it almost needs an in-person dynamic because there's so much that we want to say and so much that we want to talk about that really can't get said in an online class. But the word privilege, I have found, evokes so many emotions within human beings and so many thoughts within human beings. And so what I wanted to give us just a chance to do, and I want to give you a chance just to reflect in this kind of final assignment, is this idea of privilege and what privilege do you bring to the table? And I know that you've talked about this a little bit in the last few weeks, but I really want you to think about this as we kind of wrap up our time together today. And here's one thing that I know. In one of the classes when we talked about this, the word privilege, it just let off fireworks, electricity. I mean, it was just, you thought I'd said, something horrible in the class. And it led to actually 3 to 4 weeks of really intense conversations about what privilege is and really breaking it down. And because people thought that what I was trying to say is that, you are privileged, whatever. And actually, I was saying that in the classes. I want us all to think about that. If you're getting a master's degree, only 13% of the population has a master's degree. There's an element of privilege that helped you get here, okay? If you're getting, if you've got a bachelor's degree, right, there's an element of privilege that helped you get to that. If you're in this program at private university, right, there are a lot of people who might want to come to Point Loma, but they decide not to because they can't afford the tuition. There's some privilege in that as well. Just saying that elicits, and probably maybe in some of you, you're thinking, look, JC, I don't have privilege. One of the guys in the classes that we talked about this, he said, I earned my privilege. Right. And this was a good student. He's not a bad person, but this one really just lit him up. And he said, I earned my privilege. He's actually a Mexican-American. He's got an incredible story. And how his family came over. I believe he's second generation. He's not first generation. His mom came over, but has been poor most of her life. And so he's really worked hard to get to where he is. And so he really struggled with this idea of privilege. And I earned my privilege, right? And there's a lot of truth to that. He's worked very hard to get to where he is, and I don't ever want to lessen that. And this idea of privilege, this discussion on privilege, is never about lessening the work that we do, right? That's not me. I would never lessen, somebody else. But what I have found in my own journey as an Afro-Latino, I used to make statements, okay? And I'm embarrassed to say this, but I would make statements like if everyone who looked like me could just pull themselves up by the bootstraps like I have. And then I remember going out to lunch, and maybe I talked about this already, but going out to lunch with, he's a professor at San Diego City College. He's a Black gentleman. He really cares about the Black struggle. And so I was actually getting involved in politics, and I needed some kind of endorsement. He said, well, before we talk about any of that, I want us to go out to lunch. So we sat at the breakfast, not lunch. We sat at the Broken Yoke Cafe. We got there when it opened, and we left like close to lunchtime. That's how much time we spent in the booth. And he walked me through, JC, I need you to understand your own privilege that you bring to the table. It's easier for you to say, everyone pull themselves up by the bootstraps, but you don't quite see it. And he helped me see that I was adopted. Well, he didn't help me see this. I knew this, but I couldn't relate. I was adopted by a white family. It was not a wealthy family at all. It was a family full of educators. None of us were rich in the family. I didn't grow up with any extra, privilege that I could see. The first home I had, the first, several years of my life where, I lived in the hood, and I still drive back to that home every now and then, when I go back home because I want to see where I came from. Moved from there to a trailer park, and then spent like the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years in a trailer park, and then moved to a home that wasn't that great. Then ended up going to the army and all that kind of stuff. But here's what he helped me see. My privilege was the fact that my first hero was a professor. My first hero is a professor, and even to this day, he still teaches. He's actually up at Biola University right now, and he's a dean up there, and he's a professor. I don't know if he teaches anymore, but he's one of the deans up there at Biola University. And he taught for many years. He was my first professor. So the fact that I was adopted into a family of educators, okay, and it was a white family, but a white family of educators put me, even though we weren't rich, we didn't have a lot of money, it put me in a different place where my mindset was different. Okay. My grandfather worked at the local university. There's a university in my hometown called Indiana Wesleyan University. It's one of the largest Christian colleges in the nation. I think they have, I don't know, it's globally, it's like 20,000 or something like that. And it's some huge number there. They've got a lot of online, programs and that kind of stuff. But even on campus there in my hometown, they've got several thousand, students who are there. It's a huge campus. Um, but just me growing up in this family of white educators, one was a professor at this university, so I had a lot of access to that university. I mean, I remember growing up, and we would take our bikes to the university. It was much smaller back then, but we would just ride around. So I was always subjected to, I get that's probably not the best word. I was influenced by these educators who had masters and doctorates, and so my first heroes were that. And obviously, it impacted me enough that I doing what I do now because I believe in education. And so my friend had to show this to me because I would go around, because I didn't grow up rich. My dad wasn't very successful. He tried, he went after business, but he continued to, fail. He never got any success in that field. Uh, my mom taught for years. They primarily live off of her retirement now. It's not a big living. And so again, I would kind of tell that story like, poor me, right? And he helped remind me, no, 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 JC, just by the very nature that your first mentor was a professor, that is privilege. And so I want you to think about that in your own life. Okay. To you, it may not look like privilege. It may look like I've worked my tail end off to get to where I am today, right? And that's what I would tell anybody who asks me. I've worked very hard, but as I've grown and matured more, I've been able to see I've worked very hard, but I've also had the luck to stand on the shoulders of some really great people. I came to California with nothing. My parents, they couldn't afford anything. I had a job and I saved up some money. So this was almost 20 years ago. And I came out with $500 cash. And then my parents wrote me a $500 check that I could cash once I got out here. And then I think I had another 500 from like tips from the restaurant that I worked at. And so I came out with a dream and $1,500 in my pocket. I've never held a check that tightly in my hand, right? And by the time I got out here, I wanted to make sure that I could cash that. And I've worked extremely hard. But there's another story that I could tell you that I was on staff with this church, and the church couldn't pay me very well, but they paid me enough. But they put me up in this, I mean, it was really a nasty place. It was this trailer on a dairy farm. And I could tell you horror stories about this, okay, but I'm not going to, we don't have time. But this is a church filled with dairy farmers, and you think dairy farmers is a bunch of poor people. On the contrary, very wealthy people. One of them, they were kind of the senior members of that church. It was a smaller church, and I just befriended. We became very good friends over time. And I'm getting ready to leave their house one time, and they said, JC, how's everything going? You doing okay? They said, we want you to, we want to support you. We want you to know that we care about what you're doing. Um, we want you to know that we see the work you're doing. They wrote me a check for $15,000. And again, I was 20, I don't know, 26, 27 or something like that. Wrote me a check for $15,000. I was able to pay off school loans that I had. I was able to buy a new car that I needed. It wasn't a nice car, but it was a new car. And I've never had someone, I mean, that's the only time that's ever happened to me. But that was privilege. Okay. And I'm not bringing that up to brag. I mean, it didn't make me wealthy or anything, but it helped me at a time that I needed one. Someone just write a check like that. So these different things that I've done where I can say that uh, that check actually helped me pay off a college, and I couldn't go back to college until I paid them off. So that check helped me pay off that college so I can get back into school. And I had to go back to community college. That's where I started, after I paid off the first college that I was at, which was a Christian private university, but I owed them money. So I had to pay them off. And then I started at community college and worked my way up. There was a professor that pulled me aside after one of my classrooms and made a statement to me. Anyway, I could just tell you story after story, but here's the deal. So can you. Okay. So if you take anything away from this class, what I want you to take away from is the realization of your own privilege. And that's not to shame you for it. That's not to make what I always say kind of in a church way, right? Is that we are blessed so that, right? We are blessed to be a blessing. You've been given things, you've been given out, you've been given opportunities. This degree that you're getting is not so that you can go out and just make life about you. The bachelor's degree that you got is not just so you can make life about you. Okay. It's, everything that you do in life needs to be outward focused. How can I use whatever I've been given, the privilege that I have, the money that I've been given, the opportunities I've been given, wherever you're at in life? How do I use any of that so that I can impact the world in a better way? Okay. That's what I want you to take away from this class. And that's why I wanted to come on. Most of the podcasts, all the podcasts you've been listening to were recorded earlier. And I was okay with that because, again, I need time to move in dissertation. But I had to come on and just share my heart with you on this one, because this is what I want you to take away from this class, is that you have privilege. Every single one of you. I don't care what your bank account says. I don't care how much money you have or don't have. The fact that you're getting a master's degree in general speaks of privilege. The fact that you're getting a master's degree from a private university speaks to privilege that you have. So here's what I want you to do for your final assignment. I want you to think about the greatest mentor that you had growing up. And I want you to think about how your life has moved in the direction of this mentor. Okay. Again, I've done this long enough to know when I ask this question, it's incredible how people, it's like the light bulb goes off in their head. Even if they hate that word privilege, the light bulb goes off in their head, because now they realize, they look back on their mentor that was their mentor, maybe in high school or middle school or elementary school, whatever it was, someone they looked up to deeply. And then they look at their life now, and almost in every class I've done this activity, 70 to 80% of the class is sitting where they are. They're doing what they are because of that mentor. That's privilege. Okay. Because I want you to think about the other people who didn't grow up in the same neighborhoods that you and I grew up in, and they had different mentors. I grew up in a trailer park, but I was surrounded by educators. My entire family, all of them, aunts and uncles, grandparents, all educators. That in itself, even though none of us were wealthy, none of us were rich, that was a form of privilege. Okay. And so then the question is, what do I do with it? So the question, again, getting back to your question, who was I'm talking about your number one mentor growing up. Okay. That's the first question. That's the first part of the question. And number two, how has having that mentor shaped the direction of your own life? And the third part, or I guess this could be another question. Okay. Now that you understand your privilege, what will be your responsibility in the world around to make the world a more equitable place? Okay. I'm not saying you have to be progressive. I'm not saying, in order to use the term that's out there, I'm not saying you need to be woke. Okay. I'm not saying any of that. but how do you use the privilege that you've been given? How do you use that to impact the world around you in the very best way? You guys have been amazing. I wish we could have been in person because I think it would have been a dynamic class, but I appreciated your responses. I appreciated the work that you've done. If you have any questions about this, you want to talk through this assignment, feel free to reach out. We can set up a phone call or Zoom or something like that. I just appreciate all of you, and I hope that you walk away from this program, this class in particular, recognizing your privilege, but then deeper than that, okay, what are you going to do with it, and who are the people that you're going to help with it? Thanks so much for listening, and feel free to reach out if you need me. Take care.